Knife of Dreams, Book 11 of the Wheel of Time series, marks the end of Robert Jordan's solo run in the series before he tragically passed away before being able to complete the series. Before giving my thoughts on this book, I just want to say thank you to Robert Jordan for creating this story and giving me a world and characters that I love. So, Book 11. After the dip in quality for books 7 to 10, many people mark this as Jordan's return to form, and a lot of people say that this is one of the best in the series, if not the best. I'm sorry to say that I won't be one of these people. This was not a return to the same level as the first 6 books to me. This is definitely a case of me having raised my expectations too high, but of course I was going to, considering what people say about this series. I loved all the other books that people loved, besides book 5 I guess, so I figured I'd love this one too. I'm honestly still not even sure what my overall feelings for the book are. I want to say I liked it, but I'm probably more 50-50 on it just because of the character POV distributions here and how much I liked each POV of the characters' main arcs in this. For me, the slog isn't really a slog besides book 10. The books were worse, but they weren't slogs to read. But if you're someone that does consider book 7 to 10 to be the slog, then how is book 11 not grouped in with those four? For me, book 11 is pretty much just a return to like book 7 levels, maybe just above book 7. One of the main praises I see for this book is that stuff finally happens. Yeah, stuff happens, but we're still focusing on the same really boring arcs that have been going on for like 3 or 4 books now. I'm not going to praise a book for finally finishing off arcs that have long overstayed their welcome. And if I'm being brutally honest here, I think that the prologue and the epilogue were more entertaining than majority of the content in between them. The arc conclusions weren't even anything special to me. The Shadow and Enduring Succession plotlines are so incredibly drawn out that their endings just feel really abrupt and not satisfying at all to me. I'll talk about my issues with each arc when I talk about individual characters. My patience for Robert Jordan's writing style has also pretty much run thin after books 7 to 10. At the start of the series, I really enjoyed it because it was a new world and I wanted to know about all the little details about it and its inhabitants. But at this point, it's just incredibly tedious to still have to read about overly long descriptions of dresses, the descriptions of the gildings of furniture, architecture we visited many times before in the past, spankings, the after effects of spankings, divided riding skirts being smoothed again and again, this person smelling like this emotion. It just feels like Robert Jordan's writing style undermines what he's trying to set up for the final act. Like he's trying to get things going, finally stuff is happening, but then this just glacial writing pace this glacial paced writing style is there, and it just kind of counteracts what he's trying to do to me. And half the time these tendencies are timed so poorly. Like there are multiple times where I'm reading some kind of character interaction and I have to go back and check what a character is referencing or responding to from the same conversation, because Jordan goes into so much detail about minutia that it actually just takes me out of the moment rather than add to some kind of immersion. This book does have some great reveals though, which I did love, but the rest of the book just isn't on par. You can clearly see that Jordan wants to get back to the good stuff of the series and finally finish off these arcs, but this book was just really dragged down by the just middling content that we've been suffering through since book 8. The only arcs I thought were great in this book were Rand's and Nynaeve's. Rand content is always a highlight of any book to me, and in my opinion Nynaeve's The Golden Crane chapter was the best in the book. But these take up a whopping 5 out of 37 chapters. Even if you're somebody that really loved Egwene's content in this book, that is still only one additional chapter and a bit of the prologue. Matt content is always enjoyable just because it's Matt, but I still think it's pretty sad that we're at book 11 of this series, and Matt courting Tuon is the best of the long arcs of the book. Have the slog books really lowered the bar that much? That being said though, I did enjoy parts of Matt's and Perrin's arcs, so let's talk about the book now. Before talking about the characters though, I want to say that I really liked how we start to see the Dark One's touch more in this book. Corridors and the like are changing, food spoiling, side-eyes failing. It all adds really well to a sense of impending doom. The prologue of this book was crazy long, sitting at around 100 pages, but I thought it was great. The prologue of this book alone was better than the entirety of book 10, no exaggeration. We finally see more of Galad, who I don't think has made an appearance since around book 5. We see that the Shanchan and the White Cloaks have allied, and Galad challenges Valda to a duel over the abuse and murder of Morghese. I've never really been a fan of stance names being used during sword fights in this series. Didn't really do much for me here either, but I still enjoyed the duel regardless. I liked seeing how Galad was using the oneness just like his little brother Rand, and how he feigned tiredness. Tiredness, is that word? I don't know, we'll go with it. In order to get the winning kill at the end. It was a cool fight overall. It's good to see something finally actually happen with the White Cloaks. So Galad is Lord Captain Commander now, and they're searching for anyone who's fighting the Seanchan. So I'm guessing, because they said that they can ally with Aes Sedai now because of some rule about the last battle. So I'm guessing that they ally with Egwene or Elaine at some point. Galad is with Biar and Bornhold, so I'm expecting some kind of conflict with Perrin in the meantime. Maybe that itself leads to some kind of agreement there where they're allied, but I don't know if Bornhold and Biar would go for that. During Suros PV, we get confirmation that she is indeed a dark friend, so I was right, and not saying that she is definitely loyal in Book 9 was a hint towards that. We get this wild moment where Shemiraj is waiting for Surat back in her rooms, and she tells Surat that Shandar is in turmoil and that she has wiped out the Imperial family. So it seems that the Seanchan were actually pretty wrapped up by the Forsaken, unless I'm misinterpreting what Shemiraj said. She said that the Empress wasn't agreeable enough, and we heard in Book 9 that from Anath that the Empress herself assigned Anath as Tuon's true speaker. So it seems that the Empress was a puppet for Shemiraj herself. When I initially read this moment, I thought it was insane and I loved it, but now that I'm done the book, the cynic in me is kind of wondering if this was planned from the beginning, or if Jordan just realized there isn't enough time to actually go to Seanchan, so he just kind of just erased the whole threat of mainland Seanchan in one page. Book 13 is called Towers of Midnight, so I assume we still go there because we know after Book 2 that that is somewhere in Seanchan, and we still haven't gotten Perrin flying or summoning all the wolves. We've heard that the wolves will be at Termon-Gai'don, so I assume that is when Perrin will summon them all. So maybe he goes to the Towers of Midnight, and they are the cliff mentioned in the vision of him flying. Because we only have 3 books left, these visions have to start coming to fruition soon. During Pravara's part of the prologue, she mentioned that there was a Aes Sedai that disappeared called Duhara. Thank God I took notes while reading this book, because I had completely forgotten about that by the time she had actually arrived in Caemlyn. So this woman is surely Black Aja. There's no way Elida just sent her as an advisor and she disappears like that from the tower without anybody knowing where she's headed, without a word to anyone. Unless Elida taught her how to travel from Dosane. Galena gets brought to Perrin by Niald and Gaul, and we get this meeting between the two that is absolutely just painful to read. I'm sitting there screaming the whole time, Perrin, please, for the love of God, do not let Galena play you this badly. So, before getting into the main arcs now, I want to talk about Siuan, because she is the POV for Chapter 1 in this. I thought we were finally going to get some good Siuan content, but no, she's just obsessing over Garth Bryn for her brief part of this book, and letting the Saladar Aes Sedai know that Egwene is still alive. Siuan is kind of just there now. She's teaching Egwene stuff and helping her out with things. She seems to be kind of a wasted character to me. Got done as bad as Perrin. Give her a good arc during Book 5, and that's pretty much it. Of course, I don't know how she goes on in future books, but that's how I'm feeling about her now. God forbid we get some good Siuan characterization in this book when we have such riveting plot lines to conclude. Perrin was the first main character, so let's talk about his arc. I really enjoyed him making the deal with the Seanchan, and I liked all his interactions with Tylee and Mishima. We get a cool bit of prophecy when they first meet, because Tylee is relieved that Perrin wasn't introduced as the Wolf King because of the Seanchan version of the Karaethon cycle saying, when the Wolf King carries the hammer, those are the final days known. When the fox marries the raven, and the trumpets of battle are blown. Perrin being the Wolf King is awesome. I don't know if that title has been mentioned before in the past. So Perrin carries the hammer now. Matt the fox has married Tuon the raven. So it seems the last thing on the checklist to be met is the Horn of Valyria being blown again. Unless this is referencing a different battle, I would assume the Seanchan attacking the White Tower. I really like Perrin in the leader role in this book, showing just how capable of one he is, and I loved his little display of power where he has all the Two Rivers longbows shoot the branch that he's holding up before the Ashmen burn it, and then as the negotiations begin, he reveals that he has this plan to use Forkroot to turn all the water in Malden's aqueduct into Forkroot 2, which I thought was really clever. Then when we see him actually go get the Forkroot, we see this bubble of evil cause this really eerie scene where one of the Seanchan clerics starts coughing up beetles before they all just flew out of him, leaving behind only an empty sack of skin. I thought that was crazy good. And I really liked how Matt and Perrin have both been set up as targets for the Forsaken after they had their meeting early on. And we see how Matt and Perrin both survived attacks by Dark Friends in this book. Perrin only escaped his attack, taking an arrow to the heart because he turned to Ty Lee in conversation. I enjoyed Perrin's time with Ty Lee more than anything focusing on Malden. I really like how Ty Lee, Mishima, and Tuon are being used to humanize the Seanchan. Sure, you have people like Surratt, but they're not all bad, and besides, Surratt is literally a Dark Friend anyways. So I hope this agreement with Ty Lee leads towards a friendship rather than them being enemies now, because we saw at the end that Ty Lee was made low blood. Talking about Fael real quick before talking about the ending to the Shadow arc, I thought all of her POVs were really boring. The only interesting thing that happened was her experiencing one of those tearings of reality, whatever they are. Besides that, she's just continuing to deal with her capture, which is admirable but pretty boring to me. And we have to suffer through her relationship with Roland. So talking about the ending to the Shadow arc, I thought it was a massive letdown. You have 3 books of Perrin chasing after Fael, building up to this huge conflict involving a camp with 100,000 Shadow. And you have Perrin constantly going on about how he's going to make the Shadow pay for what they've done. No mercy for the Shadow. And then the actual battle takes up a couple pages. And we skip most of it, like 80% of it, so that we can spend time with Fael trapped in a fucking basement trying to hype Morghese up to flap a flag. And don't worry, once they all are rescued, Jordan will make time, or take the time, to show that Roland did, in fact, pinch everyone's bottoms on the way out. Because there is absolutely nothing happening at that moment that would be more interesting that we could swap to. The whole ending to the arc just feels so abrupt and anticlimactic. There isn't even a reaction to Perrin's fork root plan. It just works. One of the wise ones says that there's like 20 Shadow wise ones still about. Where is the tension? The only tension for this whole thing is the potential tension between Perrin and Fael over Roland, but nope. Jordan tosses that out the window, having Perrin shell out the most undeserved death in the series. Roland got done so dirty, it's sad. It's obvious that Jordan just wants these arcs to be finished with, and he doesn't want this issue between Perrin and Fael taking any more page time going forward. And then we have Aram, who just fizzles out and dies like a fucking weak ejaculation.
It is like a weak ejaculation.
Okay.
Shit.
Okay, alright.
And I just couldn't care less. Why should I? Ever since book 4, Perrin is just going on about how Aram is too eager with the sword. It's not like there's any kind of relationship between the two that would give this moment some kind of emotional weight. And the slog books have taken up so much more time than they needed to, and there's only 3 books left. We don't have, well, Jordan thought it would be 1 book, so we really don't have any time to give Aram any kind of proper arc. So yeah, 3 books of build up, Perrin runs for a bit, kills a couple guys, fights Aram, runs for a bit more, and finds Fael straight away, and that's that. Ty Lee found Savannah off screen, don't worry. Thank fuck that miserable arc is finished. I am curious though if Ty Lee now has that box that Samael gave to Savannah to use on Rand. The only satisfaction I got from the conclusion to this arc was Galena being captured by Tharava again and basically made Geishane for life, or what's worse than Geishane? That Sang? I think that Sang. The ones that do the useless jobs, considering it's Tharava. So the Isle, or the Shadow rather, are heading back to the Threefold Land and bringing her with them. Good riddance to her, good riddance to the Shadow. Next up we have Matt. Matt was the main POV for this book. I believe he had the most chapters. Like I explained earlier, I did enjoy his parts of the book just because it's Matt, but he's mainly still just courting Tuon, which isn't exactly the most riveting content for a book 11 out of 14. At the start of his arc, we get a moment I have been waiting for since book 9. He finally snaps with Joline. And of course, Jordan being Jordan, this is in the form of him giving her a spanking, but I still thought it was great that he is finally not taking any shit from her anymore. During this altercation, we see the Aes Sedai trying to channel at Matt, and they find out about the Foxhead Medallion, which leads to them doing what Elena and the others did during book 7, I want to say, where they channel at him lightly, trying to test out the boundaries of the Terangrial, which leads to an insane development for the story here, with an Aes Sedai actually showing appreciation and gratitude, with Teslin snapping at Joline, getting her to stop harassing Matt. Shout out to Teslin for that one. And the Foxhead Battalion actually leads to us finding out that Anan was in fact Aes Sedai at some point. So I was off saying that I thought she used to be Amyrlin, but I was kind of halfway there with her just being Aes Sedai. So I don't see why she would be stilled. She seems to be pretty okay to me. I assume she burnt herself out, and I also assume she will be healed by an Ashaman at some point going forward. We got some nice Aludra progression with her using her Nightflower lofting tubes as cannons, so we see what the visions of Mat grabbing fireworks with his hand meant, and the one of him using men as bowling pins, or at least what causes what they signify. And this is all part of Eludra's plan to get back at the Seanchan for wiping out the Illuminators. And in the same chapter we get a really interesting reveal that Mat has actually been having multiple sets of dice rolling in his head at the same time. One stopped when he made the deal with Eludra, and another stopped when he gave the razor to Tuon. So it seems to me like the dice are setting Mat's fate, but I don't know if it's saying that's actually up to chance, or if the dice just roll until he's like in the desired pathway, so to speak. I like Mat's relationship with Tuon. I think it's the best in the series just because it's one we get to see actual development for besides Lan and Nynaeve, but the important thing about what makes their relationship good, at least for me, is that we get to see them actually learn about each other. I think that's the big highlight there that makes their relationship enjoyable. And they have some great moments together in this book. I liked the part where Tuon ran away with the razor after they met the Tinker group, and she had this moment where she asks Mat, do you know what this is and all that. I like that scene together. And in the same scene, we got this moment where Mat kind of puts together in his head that the Aelfin and Aelfin have probably been in his head since he went through those stone door to Rangriel way back in book 4. And the Hell chapter was pretty good too. I enjoyed that. I liked getting to see Tuon's more naive and I keep saying Nynaeve instead of naive now when I'm doing these reviews, but we got to see her more naive side and curious side. And like I said for Perrin earlier, I thought it was cool how we see in this book that the Dark Friends are actually aiming towards Mat and Perrin now, and we see it again after Tuon and Mat leave the Hell and they're attacked by Vayne. I like the fight up until the ending where we get once again this stupid idea among the 3 Eminence Fields boys where they just refuse to cause any kind of harm to a woman, and it is just so stupid, and Mat is actually going to die because of it this time around until Tuon intervenes and kills the woman. Like, I'm not saying the boys should go around fucking rocking the jaws of every female character that annoys them, but to let someone kill you just because it's a woman is just so stupid. And I get that it's a matriarchal society, but that just goes beyond reason. And what else was it? Max starts calling Tuon Precious as some kind of retaliation for her always calling him Toy, and he enters himself into this game unknowingly where they see who's the first to stop calling each other by their pet name, which Mat loses during this fight. We got this other cool moment where the Aes Sedai are trying to demand that the Seanchan end the fighting, and Tuon and Seleucia absolutely kick their asses using the Adham. By now, returning viewers should know how much I dislike Aes Sedai, so this moment made me instantly like Tuon more than pretty much the entire female cast, besides a literal handful. I could probably count them all with a finger to spare. Another cool moment from this scene was that after Mat freed the Aes Sedai, Joline wants him as her warder, which Teslan even warns him about to be careful, because she can try to get him to agree to it without him even realizing what he's agreeing to, and she just warns him to be cautious of the fact in general. And what else happened with Mat and Tuon? They had their first kiss in this book after Mat decides to spare a snake because it doesn't bite unless it's threatened or something like that, which impresses Tuon. And the first one is awkward, and she makes fun of Mat for it, which everybody laughs at, which causes Mat to go all out. And the second one is a full effort toe curler. There's been a few moments like this where Mat impresses Tuon with how kind of capable he can be. I can't remember them off the top of my head because the last 4 books have not been memorable, but they're definitely there. I really like this moment between them. It really felt like an actual earned development in the relationship. And we get Mat's reunion with the band in this book too, which we primarily get from Tuon's POV. I thought Tuon's POV in this book was really good. When they're riding back to the camp, we finally see that Tuon makes the connection between Rand and Mat, and we learn about the fancy new crossbow cranks. And Tuon also witnesses firsthand just how good a general Mat is, and she sees how the band adores him, and they all have these eager expressions when he does return to the camp. Another moment from Tuon I actually forgot to take a note of that just came to my head now that made me like her more is her reaction to finding out that she's capable of learning to channel. And she basically talks about how what separates her from the Marat, the Mani, the Aes Sedai is that it's her choice not to become like them, which is pretty stupid, but I can admire her refusing to kind of break at that news. You know, all the other Saldam kind of just had complete meltdowns when they found out they could channel, and they just refused to believe it. But Tuon's kind of, you know, she sees the facts, she's accepted them, but she's still remaining her own individual, separating herself from the fact that she can channel, which I thought was pretty cool. The POP ends with a really great moment where Tuon realizes she doesn't really have a clue what kind of man she's gotten herself involved with, the same way Mat has been feeling about Tuon continuously, and we get this great line where she says that Mat isn't a buffoon, but a lion loose on the high plains. I really, really like that line. And there's another line I liked a lot when Tuon is talking to Talmains, and she says that a battle won't get them out of Altara, and Talmains responds, well then, in that case he's planning us a war. Really liked that line as well, that was so good. There was an intriguing line from Noel where he said that he, Noel being Jane Firestarter, if you haven't watched any of my previous videos where I guessed that, let himself be made into a tool by, and then it cut off there without saying who by. So, and in book 1, Ishmael said that he painted Jane Firestarter a fool before sending him back to the Ogier, letting himself think that he was free of him. So it seems like Ishmael used Jane Firestarter, which makes me think that Shara is actually going to be full of dark friends to be used during the last battle or something, because we know that is where Jane has gone in the past. So if Ishmael sent him there for that purpose, that would be pretty nuts. Skipping to the end, Fior Karede finally meets up with Mat and Tuon, and after Mat agrees to let Tuon go back with Karede, Tuon finally says that Mat is her husband 3 times, completing her half of the marriage ceremony, making Mat the Prince of the Ravens. He couldn't possibly have a better title given to him. And we also got the foretelling about him from Lydia that Tuon mentioned in book 9, I want to say. I really like how now, even after marriage, Mat and Tuon still aren't mutually in love, and Tuon doesn't really even comprehend fully the notion of being in love, but she does still clearly have these feelings for Mat, like her cherishing the silk rosebuds that he gave her, and all these times when she gets jealous over him, like how she just immediately shut down the idea of him being Joline's warder. It's interesting that she married Mat for the Empire after seeing how good a general that he is. I wonder how that marriage will even actually work out, because they both seem to accept the fact that they'll be fighting each other without being each other's enemies. I still think Tuon is going to die at some point, like Tylin, so that they both represent the ravens on Mat's shoulders. I feel like it was said during a previous book, during a particular vision, alluding to Mat using Eluder's dragons, that Mat was sad during that vision or something like that. So, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like that might signify Mat accidentally killing Tuon with one of the cannons in the future. If not, maybe the Galam kills her, I'm not sure, because the Galam is still following Mat, because we heard from, was it Tom that said he killed somebody in Durador after they left? So I don't know, I'm kind of just guessing here, but I do think Tuon is definitely dead. Mat's final battle was the best of the 3 we got, but I still didn't really do much for me. The battle with the mercenaries chasing after Tuon was set up, but it still just felt like throwing a bunch of fodder into a blender to me. I did like it for setting up the dragons being used on a larger scale down the line though, and I did like how Mat used that little fortification being built up as bait. Honestly, Rand versus the Trollocs, Mat versus the mercenaries, Perrin versus Shadow, and the whole Camelin battle just kind of felt to me like Robert Jordan going like, hey, they liked Demise Wells and the Battle at Emmons Fields, surely they'll like this too, all I need to do is add in some flashy 1 power usage and some explosions. Never mind the fact that the Battle at Emmons Field and Demise Wells had excellent build-up that wasn't drawn out, attention, and came at the end of great character arcs for their respective books. Saying that, I did like Rand versus the Trollocs because it was the first time we saw Luz Therin forcibly take control of the 1 power, which that alone adds enough tension for me. Of course, I do have to mention the letter. We finally get Tom's letter revealed and Moiraine confirmed alive. This didn't really do much for me, if I'm being honest. Moiraine being alive was never really in question. It's not something you predict and you're like, oh, will this happen? You know, there's so many viewings and different prophecies pointing towards her being in them in the future. You know, it's not really something you question. It's just, okay, well, she must not be dead then. I think that's the biggest oversight from Min in the whole series so far, is her saying, well, all my visions come true, but not this one because Moiraine's dead. Well, then you should probably surmise that she's not dead, Min. And then it turns out that Tom Matt and Noel will be going to the Tower of Genji, which I guess, I can't remember what video, last one or the one before it. So that was pretty cool. And the most interesting thing about the letter to me, honestly, was the fact that Tom is the one that Moiraine will end up marrying. Didn't see that coming. There were probably hints at this in the past. All I remember is their battle of wits in the Stone of Tyr, and I think it was because of Tom's stories the only reason that Moiraine was like visibly giddy or something. So I guess it was there the whole time. I just didn't notice. Unfortunately, the next character appearance was Elaine. Elaine's Andorian succession arc is just so bad. It's funny. I cannot believe Elaine has replaced Nynaeve as a main POV. I keep saying that in my videos now, but it's true. I understand why, seeing as Nynaeve is with Rand now, but to have such a stagnant and uninteresting character as a main focus point in this story is just insane to me when there's so much more on offer from the rest of the cast. Like, give us more Logain, give us more Siuan, give us more Aviendha by herself away from Elaine, please. Brigitte under the same conditions. Give us more of the Forsaken. Give us more Elaine. Egwene. Give us more Egwene. I would gladly take more Egwene than Elaine. I hate Egwene too, but at least she has some actual character progression and her character actually means something for the story other than something that she may do during the last battle that I've yet to see. At least Egwene is actually acting as a foil to Rand's character. I've been holding on to the tiniest sliver of hope that Elaine's arc would have some kind of use to it, some kind of point to it, but there just wasn't. We have to go through her painfully dull arc for 3 books, and all we get out of it is her winning the succession. Does she ever face any kind of consequences for her rash decisions that she makes because of her comparing herself to the past Queens of Andor? No, she doesn't. All she does is get captured by the Black Aja, which is such an empty gesture because she's just confident the whole time she'll be rescued. It does nothing for her character, and we find out from Brigitte that she's just never scared during the whole thing. And this comes back to a complaint I made last video when I was talking about book 10. My general thoughts on some of the characters in this series is that they just constantly get by in spite of all these shitty things about their characters, like all these negative traits that they have, and they just never face any repercussions because of them. They just completely get by. It does not matter that they have these flaws. They don't need to actually work on them. They just need to keep doing what they're doing and they'll succeed. You know when Elaine's complex towards these past Queens of Andor was actually interesting? Book 4, when it was introduced, and she's just been this same stagnant Elaine crying over how she doesn't compare to these queens and her mother and blah 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 since book 4. Elaine just continues to succeed in spite of herself with 0 repercussions. What about the plethora of dark friends that I was excited to see actually do something? Cheyenne, Hanlon, the Black Aja, they gonna do anything? Nope. How about Aramilla? Nope. How about all the turncoat mercenaries? Nope. The attack on Camelin is just utterly pathetic, and once again, there is just 0 tension during a final battle because, as I already mentioned, Elaine is captured and rescued within a single chapter, and she just is unafraid for the whole thing. Like, how can there be this many antagonists within Camelin, and they all culminate into one big wet fart? They're useless. They don't do anything. They kill 2 Aes Sedai that nobody cares about. We've seen the female characters close to Elaine call her brave for a long time now. Seems to me like they don't understand the difference between bravery and recklessness. Elaine decides not to bring any warders into Cheyenne's manor because a sister would never turn a warder on another sister, which has to be the dumbest thing said in this book. Is the whole point of warders not to protect them from anything and everyone? Or is that some hidden rule I'm forgetting about from way back in the series? Warders don't attack other sisters. And Elaine is even getting giddy at having to capture Black Aja, which is just beyond ridiculous to me. Giddy, seriously, like, I know that's an aspect of her character. She had to grow up too quick because of her focus on becoming queen and whatever, but she's just so annoying. And, like, look at the White Tower. They have their warders on them 24/7 now to protect themselves from other sisters. Different context, but the warders are there in case they need to attack other sisters. Like, her and Rand really are 2 peas in a pod. They both showed an impressive lack of intelligence, but at least Rand faced consequences for his stupidity. Elaine just had to ride tied up in a wagon for a few hours. Aes Sedai lack of competence is actually astounding. They really just planned on riding out of Camelin with Elaine in the trunk. Did Carrie-Anne just not tell them anything? Like, not even Marilyn, who seems to be the same, whatever the group of Black Aja who knows who their Black Aja is called. And speaking of Carrie-Anne, that had to be the most anticlimactic, lackluster ending to the whodunit subplot. Was there even any hints towards it being Carrie-Anne? Marilyn just says she's a Darkfin and Van Dien stabs her, and she dies, and then that's it, done. Like, what was actually the plan for that subplot? Just show Saretha being incredibly suspicious, and then boom, gotcha, it's actually Carrie-Anne? Now, admittedly, I have pretty much just skimmed Elaine's chapters since book 8, so if I have actually missed the hints pointing towards her, then fair enough, please let me know them in the comments. The only good thing about the Camelin battle was getting to see Brigitte come into her own as a general, but honestly, Brigitte with Elaine is a lot less entertaining than her with Matt. Besides Brigitte, the whole battle is kind of just look at the flashy one-power attacks. And it's funny because Robert Jordan himself knows how boring Elaine's arc is and how dragged out it can feel, because he himself used it for that drawn-out feel in this book. We get this chapter with Khalid where he's heading towards Matt, and then we get this incredibly dull chapter with Elaine where she just wins because we need to hurry up and end her arc and move on. And then we're back with Khalid straight after. While we're talking about Camelin, I have to ask, is Rand after pulling a Jon Snow here? Like, it kind of feels completely irrelevant that he is Tigraine's son. Can Elaine maybe have some kind of reaction to this information? He's Galad's brother, for crying out loud. Maybe pay some attention to that. Like, it seems just unimportant outside of just meeting criteria for prophecies. And I don't really have anything else to mention from Elaine's arc outside of Avienda's cool new ability to detect what Terangriel can do when she touches them. Elaine is pretty much just spending half her arc complaining about pregnancy issues, which was just boring, and blaming Rand for her being pregnant, which is so stupid considering that she made Rand have sex with her because he already had with Min and Avienda. Okay, we're back to day 2 of recording. I have a general rule where I stop myself if it's 10 PM and I'm still recording. So I wanted to talk about that dull scene with Elaine real quick. There's this scene after she wins the battle at Camelin where all the high seats are meeting her in the, what's it called, the throne room, whatever it's called. And basically, it has the same abrupt feeling the ending of all the arcs have, even though they're so drawn out beforehand, where there's like this threat of the arc still continuing because some high seats are still like, well, we're not really siding with you still. And then they ask what her plan is with the Ashaman and the Black Tower, and she says she essentially can't do anything but send in guards. And then they're like, oh, okay, we swear to you, we're for House Trakan. And it just feels really abrupt, and again, it just feels to me like all the other arcs that this is just ending the way it is because it needs to, because everything needs to get wrapped up because we've spent too much time on it. It doesn't feel really, it doesn't have a satisfying factor to it for me. Now I finally get to talk about some good content. Rand's chapters once again were great. When we first meet him back at Talgaren's Manor, he's having more visions of Perrin and Matt, but afterwards this time he sees the Shimmering Face again, which we find out is actually Marden. So Marden and Rand have been linked after crossing Balefire streams during book 7, I want to say. I think it was at the end of 7. I'm not too sure what to say on this because it's honestly sending my brain into a frenzy. I'm pretty confused because I was certain that the Aelfin saying that Rand needed to die in order to live meant that there was 2 of him. But it's the Shimmering Face isn't like a second Rand, it's Marden, unless he's a second Rand, which I don't see how that's possible, because Ishamael was there with Luthen during the Ages Legends, but Marden is another body that Ishamael has been reincarnated to, unless the Dark One like plucked a second Rand out of somewhere else, like a mirror world or something, but I think that's too far-fetched. But if Rand and Marden are one, I feel like there's still the second version of each person, because I talked about this in my book 7 video where there's like, when there was 2 Moradins the same way there was 2 Asmodeans when Rand cut him off from the Dark One. So I feel like there's still a, you know, a light version of a person and a dark version of the person, and, you know, to keep in tune with my yin and yang theories I've been having throughout the series, you know, a yin version and a yang version. So I feel like there could be a yin and yang Rand, Marden, and Luthen, so it's kind of like a 4-in-1 kind of thing going on. Maybe that's way off there, or I could be thinking in the wrong direction. Maybe Asmodean being cut off from the Dark One is the same as Rand connecting to Marden, and that's why both instances had like 2 of each person. This made me think about what the Aelfin said to Rand that he revealed in this book, where it said the north and the east must be as one, the west and the south must be as one, the 2 must be as one. This makes me feel like the line that says the 2 must be as one is referring to either Rand and Marden or Rand and Shadowrand, because he said that the line that says in order to live you must die comes straight after this. So I think like the first 2 lines are related and the second 2 lines are related. I'm guessing Marden and Rand are as one now after crossing Balefire streams, which I think is kind of hinted at more during the altercation with Shemiraj, which I'll talk about later. But I'm not going to hurt my brain trying to predict this, because I feel like I'll just be way off going down a rabbit hole in the wrong direction. After Rand sees Moradin sends a bunch of Trollocs to the manor to kill him. Kind of need to turn your brain off for that fight. That many Trollocs charging the place surely doesn't go that smoothly. But regardless, I still really enjoyed that fight because I thought what were they called? The Blossoms of Fire and the Death Gates were phenomenally badass. I really enjoyed them. You might say I'm hypocritical here for saying that I like this and the other battles were just a bunch of flashy one power expositions, but the difference here for me, an important one, was the Lews Therin element, because this was the first time that we saw Lews Therin completely seize control of the one power, and we get this really great sequence where he's spinning webs, and once the battle is over, we get a really intense scene where he tries to kill himself with the one power, the same way he did during the Dragonman prologue, which I thought was crazy. There was a Loyal POV where he marries Aerith, which was pretty meh because it's just more insta-love. I really liked how it finally gave him the chance to speak his mind to his mother, though, or rather to the window, but it was still a good moment where he got to have some backbone, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he handles addressing the what's it called, the stump, trying to get them to stay and fight during the last battle. Something really interesting from the POV was Loyal's mother saying that they want to use the Book of Translation to leave the world. So leaving worlds, going to other worlds is actually a thing, like Moghedien said during Book 4. It is not just going to mirror worlds like I thought it was. That's pretty fascinating to me. Surely the Ogier should probably mention this to Rand. Like, imagine he had a bunch of recruits from other worlds for the last battle. That would be pretty insane. And it makes a bit more sense to me now how the Seanchan have these other creatures like Raken, Grollum, Lapires, the bird-looking things I can't remember the name of. So I guess they're just from other worlds. I still like the Rand and Cadsuane dynamic, but Rand himself needs to start showing some backbone there with her. He should at least test the boundaries of their agreement there instead of just letting her treat him like a spoiled brat constantly. Fast forward to the end and we get the meeting with Shemiraj, and I have to say I respect Rand's consistency here to hear from like 5 different people that something is a trap, and his response is still, fuck it, we ball. And what do you know, the trap people warned him about did end up being a trap. And thanks to Cadsuane's Terangriel, and that's disguised as Tuon, is distorted to reveal Shemiraj, and chaos ensues. And then Shemiraj, in the last ditch effort, launches a fireball at Rand, and because of Min's insistence on her being there, which is always so annoying, Rand is forced to use what's at his disposal to protect her, his hand. Rand gets completely floored by the blast, and by the time he comes to, the battle is already completed and Shemiraj is captured. Like the rest of the battles in this book, this was very rushed and mostly skipped over, but the reveals from it were huge. The first one coming from Shemiraj herself. She reveals to the party that Rand is actually hearing Lews Therin's real voice, but it's actually a rare variant of a more common madness. And Rand's left arm is reduced to a stump towards the wrist, and his vision is screwed. But the second insane and more subtle reveal that comes after Nynaeve heals Rand is that Rand has black flecks in his eyes. Black flecks, guys. So Rand has Saa in his eyes from using the true power, which is absolutely fucking mental. He must have used it trying to shield Min. Maybe that's why his eyes are messed up, because we've heard in the past that the true power is quite costly to use. So good job there, Min. You're as helpful as always. Like, this is such a crazy development. And like I said earlier, I think this is linking Rand and Moradin together as one, if he's like using Moradin's access to the true power. But a kind of crackpot idea I have on this is like, if Rand is the shadow reincarnated or something, because I don't know if that even makes sense after all we've heard in the story so far. But like, there's this stuff with Corinne and Neil's notes going on about how the world is protected by a lie and all this stuff, and she says that Ishamael is like, he's the betrayer of hope, but he's like telling the truth or some shit. So there's all this stuff we need to find out about. And there was a moment in this book where, or is this from something I've read in like the first 4 chapters of book 12? I'm gonna say it anyways. There's this moment where Lews Therin is like, well, if you're not me, then who are you? And I feel like that was a bit ominous, a bit of foreshadowing there maybe. But then again, Shemiraj did say that he's hearing a past life there, so I guess that's just way off. So Rand is pretty much fucked. He's going to lose his mind 100% now if it was ever in doubt. Moghedien said that the true power was incomparably more addictive and harmful to the mind than saidin, and that in combination with the terminal madness that Shemiraj talked about, it looks like Rand is going to go bonkers soon. I'm curious if Rand having access to the true power now means that Matt and Perrin will too, because of the connection they have together. Like Rand being connected to those two will kind of act as like a conduit for the true power now that he's connected to Myrdin as well. So that's pretty interesting. I like Min even less now. I know it's not fully her fault because Rand is still not strong enough, hard enough to tell her not to come with him. But like her insistence on being there was not needed at all. Like, what was she needed for at that meeting? You can say she should have been there to look at people's viewings, but could she not have done that at another meeting in the future when it was not guaranteed to be a trap? Also, why is Rand's harem even a thing? I don't see the point in it not just being Rand and Min. So far, the harem has done more harm for Rand than good. Like, Elaine has inspired the Tyren lords to besiege Darlene, and Min has gotten him one less hand. Like, Elaine and Min in combination have indirectly done more harm to Rand than like some of the Forsaken. Nynaeve's Golden Crane chapter was amazing. Lan is mad at Rand for not paying any attention to the Borderlands, and after he decides to go there, Nynaeve makes him give an oath in which he promises that if she sends him to the Borderlands through a gateway and men there ask to follow him, he has to allow it and lead them. And then Nynaeve proceeds to show why she is the absolute best and sends him to World's End, which is as far away as possible from where he wants to be while still being in the Borderlands. And then she goes around recruiting men to join him, saying that Lan Mandrag Oran is riding towards Tarmon Gaidon. Yes, that is how the pronunciation guide I found online said to pronounce Lan's surname. I don't even have much to say for that chapter besides that I loved it, and it just got me feeling so emotional when the guys in the inn were like, no, he won't ride alone, and they were crying. It was so good. We got a pretty good Logain chapter where he's with the Sea Folk, and we found out that the Amair have actually all killed themselves in a mass suicide because of the prophecies marking the end of Illusion, which was pretty wild. The great part of that chapter was the mourn if you must but mourn on the March to Tarmon Gaidon line from Logain. I thought that was epic. I really hope Logain is on Rand's side. I think he is for now. Davram, I'm not too sure on anymore. It doesn't really make sense to me that he just showed up in Camelin so ready to serve Rand, and we don't know who he met with at the end of his part of the Book 10 prologue, so Davram is kind of sus. And there was this vision or viewing a while back, I can't remember which one. It was probably a dream because of what I'm remembering about it, but basically somebody holding some form of blade, can't remember what form of blade, but some kind of blade towards Rand, meaning him harm without Rand being aware of it. So I think that was pointing towards Davram betraying him as a dark friend. I'm not sure if the darkness Min saw in Davram's aura is pertaining to him being a dark friend or him dying. I think dark friend just because normally when Min sees auras about death, they're normally a lot more detailed than just darkness. But she saw darkness in Perrin's auras too, and I just don't see Perrin becoming a dark friend unless Fael is murdered in the most brutal way possible, or if he's forced to by like a circle of 13 or something. There's also the whole Soul of the Shadow theory I've had for a few books now. The final character to talk about is Egwene. To summarize, she's getting spankings, embracing pain, and sowing seeds. I can understand why people loved Egwene's chapter in this book. I personally was just indifferent towards it, but it's not even because I dislike Egwene as a person. The direction Egwene's character has gone throughout the entire series just doesn't really interest me. Egwene in the first 5 books was presented to me as somebody I found highly annoying and at times just outright detestable, especially during like book 5 and her moment with Nynaeve, and nothing's really done to combat the flaws in her that made me feel that way about her initially. And I feel like the main thing that has caused me to feel that way about Egwene is that a lot of her time with the Wise Ones is skipped over. Now don't get me wrong, we did see a lot of it during like I want to say book 5 or 4, but a lot of it is skipped over, and her time with the Wise Ones is pretty much when she grew up. You know, it's when she stopped being a brat, which was when I hated her. But because a lot of it is skipped over, and it's mainly when we do see her focusing on her becoming a Dreamwalker, now that she has become Amerlin in book 6, when she reaches that point leaving the Wise Ones, she has basically grown up and isn't really exhibiting a lot of the traits that made me hate her. But because I didn't really get to see the moments where she grew away from those traits, even though she's not exhibiting them anymore, I still dislike her because I haven't really gotten any of the moments to make me kind of forgive her character for being like that in the past, which is causing me to still dislike her as much. And you could probably argue, well, that's just life, and To me, fiction just doesn't work that way. It's not like I'm a writer or anything, but when I'm reading a story, I want to see the characters actually grow away from what makes them dislikable. You know, I got the same response as a complaint I had in one of the slog books. I was like, there's too many Aes Sedai getting introduced, I can't keep track of the names. And one response to me in the comments was, well, yeah, that's like life, you just meet all these people and you can't keep track of the names. Yeah, well, this isn't life. I know you should reflect some qualities of life to make the content relatable, enjoyable, but, you know, some aspects of life maybe you shouldn't reproduce, like not being able to keep track of anybody's names, or, you know, people just, you know, reaching this point in their advancement as a person, and you're like, well, they just grew up. And just before people flame me in the comments, there have been plenty of moments where Egwene has been shown to have grown as a person. I've mentioned them in my videos, but just those specific traits she has that made me really detest her during the first 5 books. I feel like we haven't really gotten many moments to show her having grown specifically away from those traits, and instead she just doesn't exhibit them anymore because she's grown up. And I feel like the reason why these particular traits haven't really been addressed head on is because Egwene is like unintentionally dislikable. I think all the Emond's Field 5 were meant to be likable from book 1, but people pretty much despise Egwene in the fandom. Same with Elaine. I don't think Elaine is meant to be dislikable, but people despise her. But like all these characters have their flaws because they're, you know, more realistic. They're these teenagers put into these tough positions and forced to grow up and all that. But still, I don't think they're meant to be dislikable. Instead of addressing these character flaws in Egwene, her arc is just really turning arrogance into confidence. For me, since book 1, Egwene has been shown to be strong, capable, and iron-willed, and I complained during my Dragon Reborn review that instead of giving her some kind of characterization, progressing her away from her negative traits, making her somewhat likable, during a book in which she is one of the main POVs for the first time ever, Jordan still just kind of doubled down on this idea of her being strong, capable, and iron-willed, and I feel like that's been the case for every book in the series. Same for this one. Sure, it's admirable that she didn't break during her capture, but that's not giving me anything new about her character. Instead, it's just another arc of her being strong, capable, and iron-willed. She could survive 3 months without breaking as a Damani all the way back in book 2, and the same with the Wise One training for 2 books. If she could avoid breaking during those 2 instances, then yeah, no shit, she can take some spankings from Sylviana, and maybe you can argue, well, it happened so often in the White Tower with Sylviana. By the time her chapter's done, it's been 9 days, you know, just over a week. You know, as hyperbolic as I can be on the channel, it's not like I actually desire to hate Egwene from start to finish. You know, I tried to give credit where it's due. She showed growth when asking what makes Aes Sedai Aes Sedai, and the same when admitting her lies to the Wise Ones, but we really only get morsels there. And just quickly talking about that answer to the question, you know, what makes Aes Sedai Aes Sedai, and saying that the Three Oaths does, that is just such a bad takeaway from that question from Egwene and Siuan there. I mean, just look at the kin, the sea folk, the wise ones. 3 bodies that are well respected, well trusted within their own cultures. If anything, the Three Oaths shows what's wrong with Aes Sedai and shows how untrustworthy they are. But that's a different rant. What Jordan chooses to continually focus on for Egwene's arcs throughout the series kind of feels redundant and repetitive to me at times. I'd like for her to be an actual likable person. I think it's pretty clear that she's being used as a foil to Rand's character. I mean, you have Cadsuane telling Rand in this same book as her chapter that, you know, steel shatters while the willow bends and survives where it must. So, you know, I don't think that's a coincidence. Not that I'm implying that Jordan has been structuring Egwene's arc on a whim here so that she's on the same level as Rand, because I talked about this during my book 2 or 3 review, where it was foreshadowed with like a vision or a viewing where Egwene had the white rod Terangrial Siuan used to cleanse Matt when he was brought to the tower. There was something implying Egwene will use that at some point in the future, so I said that that's pointing towards her being Amyrlin, so she was always going to be Amyrlin. But I think that maybe the way her arc has been structured throughout the series might not have given the best opportunity for her as a person rather than her as a foil for Rand, if that makes sense. Another thing I really wasn't vibing with was how easily Egwene sows her seeds and manipulates everyone. She achieves everything she does in only 9 days of capture. Like, when Egwene is talking to other Aes Sedai, it doesn't even feel like when other characters are. It legit feels like Rand talking to a whole load of Weramons. And you know, speaking of Weramon, seeing as I mentioned just now, I might as well mention, I forgot to say during like my book 8 review when Rand goes crazy with Kalandor, Weramon 100% betraying Rand during the last battle. I forgot to say that in the video, gonna say it now. So Egwene is pretty much Taviran without being Taviran, which I really dislike. Like, she made a severe blunder going to the harbor, and like Elaine, she succeeds in spite of herself and actually ends up in the best position possible because Elida is a complete incompetent. And speaking on Elida real quick, now that I mentioned her, I've been super harsh on Elida recently. I think, like, I've been really hating her as a character. I haven't mentioned it in videos because I just didn't see the point. But recently, and this book specifically, she kind of reminds me of Rand. She kind of mirrors Rand a bit for me, because if you think back on Rand in book 7, after the events of Demise Wells, he's pretty much overcompensating, being overconfident because he needs to like keep his mental steady after that experience of being tortured. And I feel like Elida, she's kind of earning some sympathy from me here because she's just so pathetic right now. Yeah, and now, you know, same as Rand was doing during book 7, she is now being overcompensating with her overconfidence after this experience with Alviarin. And not to say that it is undeserved for her to be in that position, you know, even before the stuff with Alviarin, she was getting pretty insufferable, but still it was something I noticed that made me kind of not want to hate on her as much as I have been. What Jordan tells us and shows us of Aes Sedai contradict each other. We're told that they are these master manipulators who are pulling the strings of kingdoms, but then we see that the only competent Aes Sedai are Cadsuane, Verin, Moiraine, and Siuan. So which is it? If it's the former, then it just isn't believable to me at all that all it takes is Egwene being unwavering and talk sense. If it's the latter, then it just is less impressive to me overall, because, as I've already said, it has been well established that Egwene is strong, capable, and iron-willed. I would expect her to succeed in a den full of incompetents who only get by because they can channel. And you can say, well, Egwene has gotten a bunch of training from the Wise Wolves and Siuan over the span of around a year, and you can say that she manipulated Emond's Field into thinking that her and Rand were the dream couple, but this should all pale in comparison to Aes Sedai who have been Aes Sedai long before Egwene was even conceived. It just doesn't really make much sense to me that Egwene gets by this easily, this frequently, without her being Taviran. Talking about the Forsaken real quick, they had a meeting early on in the book where Martin said that somebody was posing as Samael that nobody knew the identity of. This was pretty intriguing to me because this, in combination with the epilogue, seems to imply that Taim is already a Forsaken that the other Chosen aren't even aware of yet, which makes me think even more that he's going to be an ableist by the last battle, especially if Martin and Rand are to be as one, if that's what the Elfin prophecy or answer was implying. I'm guessing that the embassy that was sent to Taim then in the epilogue are just all going to end up as Dark Friends now, because I'm also guessing that all the men in the Palace of Taim have been turned to the shadow using a circle of 13, because I highly doubt that every person that gets promoted to Asherman is just somehow a Dark Friend. I think they're being forced into it, and I think that's the fate the embassy will meet as well. I feel like the most popular fan theory at the time of this book coming out way back when is that Taim is Demon Dread. I've never been a fan of that theory. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially after book 9. If Taim is Demon Dread in disguise, why would they have both given the same order to Kissman separately to kill Rand? And when I was talking about book 6, when at the time of doing that review, I was talking to somebody on Discord, and they said that he thought Demon Dread was a team as well at the time, and I never was a fan of that theory, because if Demon Dread really hates Lews Therin as much as has been said in the story, I don't think he would ever pose as somebody claiming to be him reborn. I just didn't think it would fit. Arengar also said herself that she was posing as Order Forsaken in the past, and she was curious who stole her trick here posing as Samael, so that's pretty interesting. I need to keep an eye out, try and figure out who she was posing out as in the past, if that's possible. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she does now that Ramanda has discovered she's a Forsaken and Elena is a Dark Friend. That's all I have to say for book 11, guys. I don't really have strong feelings for this to say, really. It was good overall. I am still pretty disappointed, though, based on how hyped up this book was. Don't know when the book 12 video will be out, because it's been like 2 weeks now since I finished this book as of recording this, and I have pretty much lost motivation with the series. I've only read 4 chapters of book 12 in 2 weeks, whereas all the slog books took 4 days, and book 11 took me like 6, and I was even on vacation in Germany and it still only took 6. So yeah, I don't know when book 12 will be completed and when the video will be out, but it should not be too long. I'm gonna try and hopefully in like 2 weeks, hopefully. But yeah, I'll see you guys when that's out.